Welcome to our podcast series, Talking with Traders, hosted by expert trader Garth McKenzie in London, from where he's interviewing various guests on the topic of trading.
Welcome back to Season 7 of Talking with Traders. We're now into the fourth year of this podcast since it started in early 2020. Once again, IG have come on board as our sponsor for this season. We are truly privileged and grateful to have such a global leader in CFD trading as our sponsor. Over the coming weeks, I'll be interviewing various guests from around the globe on the topic of trading. Some will be follow-ups with past guests, and some will be new guests. The idea behind this podcast is that you get a variety of views from a broad spectrum of market professionals. None of what you hear in these episodes is intended to be financial advice, but it is intended to get you thinking about how you might be able to apply what you hear here into your own trading and investing. Please remember to subscribe to this podcast in your favorite podcast app. That way you'll be notified when new episodes are released. Once again, thank you to IG for funding and sponsoring this podcast into its fourth year. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Please enjoy Season 7 of Talking with Traders. Our guest this week for Talking with Traders is Viv Govender. Viv is a portfolio manager at RandSwiss. And Viv, you were put on to me by your founder, I guess, Gary Boyson, who's also been on this podcast before. And he said to me, you've got to speak to Viv about artificial intelligence because he's got all the knowledge in the world. He's running an artificial intelligence portfolio for clients. You got to chat to him. So I'm very pleased to be speaking to you, Viv. Welcome to Talking with Traders today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. So give us quickly a bit of background. I mean, as I said, you're a portfolio manager at RandSwiss, but as I do with every new guest, I like to just spend 2 minutes getting a bit more insight into who you are, where you've been, and what your career has been like to this point.
Well, I spent a lot of time at Varsity, getting my postgrad and whatnot. Did a bit of teaching at the start. Before getting into the markets around the middle of the 2005, I think it was, I got into the markets for the first time.
Okay.
Tried to apply some of the academic knowledge to, the actual market. Started off mostly back then in trading, short-term trading, but moved over to analysis within a few years. Been at a couple companies through that time. Done most stuff around the if you look at my DOFA, you'd see I have quite a long list of licenses that I have here because I've been doing a variety of different things for like almost 2 decades now. But yeah, then I moved on into portfolio management and wealth management about a decade or so ago, getting more towards longer term investing away from the shorter term, exciting stuff to the longer term, which I think is more profitable in the long term. And I've been at RandSwiss since 2017, so that's about 6 years now.
Mm. Okay. All right. Super. All right. And as I mentioned, the main reason I wanted to speak to you today is around artificial intelligence, because you've been tipped by Gary as the man to speak to in this regard. And I know you and I had a conversation yesterday just teeing up this podcast, and it was clear from chatting to you that you've got a hell of a lot of knowledge on AI. So I'm looking forward to this more formal conversation of this recording today. Obviously, artificial intelligence is a theme. It's an investment theme that has come into vogue lately. And, we see these themes come and go. We've seen cryptocurrencies, NFTs, things come and go, .com bubble back in the day. Artificial intelligence is the thing that's in vogue at the moment. It sounds very exciting, but I guess in terms of starting this conversation, just let's start at the basics. What is artificial intelligence? And then from there, we will build on that to talk about, the more detailed stuff and ultimately wrap it up with investment opportunities in artificial intelligence and how you're expressing your view through your portfolios.
Okay. So intelligence is a weird thing. It's almost, you know it if you see it kind of thing. It's like, fire. We know what fire is before we could define how the combustion process worked. So we know that, the burning hot thing over there is fire. We know when something behaves in a certain way, we think it's intelligent. That's why we had a thing like the Turing test, where it was basically intelligence defined when you could fool a person into thinking this was a human being instead of a machine. And that's what the Turing test was determined to be useful, because actually defining intelligence itself is such a difficult process.
Right.
Generally, it's the ability to basically achieve a goal, or to learn from, particular, material coming in or information coming in. Those are the usual things that we see when it comes to the definitions of intelligence. Even currently with these things like these large language models, which many people will think are intelligent, you found that, even before they were up to the current level, we had people at Google, for instance, that one Google engineer came out and thought that I think their program at the time was, sapient. It was sentient. Sorry, it could actually think.
Okay.
Right now, the definition is, I think, not strong enough to define whether or not these programs can think. But it does seem to be that the programs that we have currently are able to do things that we associate with intelligence, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
okay.
it's a very broad answer, but that's kind of like where things are at the moment.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
find very smart people like Noam Chomsky saying this stuff isn't intelligent, it's just parroting.
Okay. When we were teeing up the conversation, you mentioned there's really two main categories of artificial intelligence. That's physical AI and symbolic AI. So, I mean, let's just chat about each of those individually, maybe starting with physical AI, or symbolic AI, whichever you choose to start with first. But give us an example of this in practice today, because it is already around us, but it's obviously just advancing all the time.
Yeah. Look, I think that the thing is that when people think about AI, people like start imagining what a machine could do, they imagine the things that are hard for us are going to be hard for the machine. The things that are easy for us are going to be easy for the machine. So you'd often have the idea of a robot walking around the building and doing stuff, but being quite dumb, in terms of what it could think about. It turns out that's the exact opposite of it. Machines can think of very smart concepts and processes, but the actual walking around a physical environment is actually a very difficult thing to do. And it's just that humans and animals have evolved over billions of years to make that particular aspect of intelligence simple. And the way I think of it is this way. If you look at, for instance, the ability of a baby to learn how to talk, a baby learns how to talk by listening to people around it. Yeah. And, most people are using a few 10,000 to 20,000 words maximum with the vocabulary. The baby is listening to maybe 5 to 10,000 words maximum per day, probably much less. And then maybe say 2 to 3 years, the baby learns to talk. Okay, when we taught these machines to talk. We put the entire output of the internet. We talked about trillions of pieces of information into these machines to learn to talk, to learn to understand language. Okay, this is many orders of magnitude more than it takes for a child to learn to talk. But when it comes to physical AI, the same process is probably going to be required. We're probably going to have to put a lot more information into the AI than it takes for a child to learn to use the physical world. The problem is, where do you get that information from? A child has 2 to 3 years to learn to walk around and to manipulate the physical world. It takes a long time for a child even to hold something to manipulate an object. But we don't have many billions of examples of that to feed into a machine, except for maybe one company, Tesla, which has that those robots with those cars with the sensors, and they I think get about 160 billion frames of information a day. Of video information a day that they could be using, but generally that information is quite limited. So what's happened is that we've been able to get very much further ahead in what you think of as basically being symbolic AI, which AI manipulating pictures. DALL-E 3, by the way, came out today. Video, music, words, those kind of things. We are way far ahead of that. Getting a machine that can basically go over, pick up a stuffed toy and bring it over to you is far more difficult to do, apparently, than having a machine that can basically beat the world champion at chess. And that is the difference we're seeing right now. But once we do get physical AI, understand that at the point at which a machine can actually look around a room and understand that those physical objects exist and how they behave, etc., and how gravity works and how physical objects move and so on, that is a whole new aspect of the world, because suddenly you find that the world of symbols are nice. I mean, white collar work is nice. We like physical stuff. We're talking about, mining equipment. We talk about agriculture. We talk about manufacturing, construction. All those things become immediately open to us. And as soon as we get the machine that can do the physical stuff, the symbolic stuff right now, like I said, far ahead. We're coming to a point where almost these machines are as good as the top 9, almost good as everyone except maybe the top 0.1% or top 2% of artists. As good in writing as anyone, beyond the top, say, 20% of writers. In physical AI, no AI is within the bottom 1% of human beings in terms of
Yeah.
physical ability. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Just
Yeah.
understanding how the world works. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. All right, so to sum it up, really, the symbolic AI is things like it can make music, it can talk, it can write, it can draw pictures, that type of stuff. The
Yeah.
physical AI is, as the name suggests, it's physical. It's self-driving cars. It's things that can go through farmlands, picking out weeds and identifying weeds in physical capacity, that type of thing. I got that
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, and also remember, that's the thing with Tesla. Why I'm such a bull on Tesla is that once you have a self-driving car, you do have the machine that can go onto the fields. You do have the machine that can build your house and clean your dishes. These self-driving cars, that ability to understand that skill, to see the world and to manipulate it, that becomes something that's universally applicable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you said, Tesla's far ahead of anybody else in terms of data on self-driving cars. I know in South Africa, where a lot of the audience is listening to this, you don't have Teslas there. But I mean, here in the UK, it's unbelievable, the number of Teslas that are driving around. Every second car, just about. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but there are lots of Teslas driving around. As you say, they've got all these different cameras all around the car. They can pick up certain things. So yeah, they're gathering a huge amount of data. Just on that, I mean, interesting. I've got a friend who has a Tesla, and he had a sort of a handbag stolen out of the car, and they managed to catch the thieves because the cameras on the car identified the thief, and they managed to use that information to track the guy down. So it's interesting, and I mean, they're catching up a hell of a lot of useful information, I guess, by doing that. When we spoke yesterday, you said something that resonated interestingly with me. You said there's something magical about AI, and the same as there was something magical about the internet. There was something magical about the iPhone. These were developments that changed our lives for the better, irreversibly. And yet things like cryptocurrency and NFTs, which have come along, and they've had a hype and they've simmered down a little bit now, but they just seem to lack that magical element of being life-changing, like what the internet was, like the iPhone. Is it really that big of a deal? Is this technology that is going to change our lives irreversibly for the better going forward?
Yeah, I mean, AI, if the progress that people are talking about comes true, it's not going to be like the cell phone or the internet. It's going to be like fire. It is going to be one of the things that redefines what it means to be a human being. And fire did that. I mean, fire basically changed how we ate, how we lived in the environment, etc. And that's going to be the kind of effect that you're going to see here. It's not going to be a binary thing where you talk about, this has a 1 or 2% differential in terms of global GDP. If AI becomes real, if you do have physical AI, we talk a double-digit, maybe even more than that, GDP growth per year for a long time.
Yeah.
We would be looking at one of those true science fiction futures where the cost of most things would go to zero, quite frankly. And that is the kind of improvement that we're looking at. Yeah, so it is that in terms of the scope. But also, I want to add a little point there. It's also magical in the terms of we don't understand how this stuff works. And that's what the amazing part of AI is that it's like fire, like the example I used of fire, is that we do not know how fire works beyond the fact that if you rub two sticks together, eventually you'll get a spark and that'll burn into something. We do not understand how oxygen worked or how combustion worked, etc. Way down the line. And it's happening right now with AI, where people are doing things that are working, but they don't know how it works. And the example I'd use is this. There's something called a theory of mind. Okay? That's the ability to know that stuff that you have in your mind, I don't have in my mind. The stuff I have in my mind, you don't have in your mind. So if I know something, you may not know it. And you'll find that young children, again, don't have that theory of mind. So if you show a secret to a young child, it would assume that because it knows it, everybody knows that secret, right?
Yeah.
And they discovered that GPT-4 had a theory of mind. And what they did then was look back and see how far back did this thing appear. And they found that GPT-3 had a theory of mind, and they hadn't even tested for it.
Okay.
And somehow creating this machine or this bunch of like numbers, these floating point numbers, basically, these little fractions in a big, massive, matrix here. Somehow have developed the ability to understand that other people had the ability to know things that you don't know, and vice versa. And that's what I call magical as well, because unlike, for instance, you build a car, eventually you build a car and you increase the engine, and then the car begins to fly or can start singing or, can do something weirdly different. That's the kind of stuff that you're seeing with AI, where you build these machines, or these programs, and somehow you don't know what they can do until you test them, which is a weird thing to understand, that you don't understand how you built it, what you're doing there, that it's doing things that you don't even expect it to do.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. But there's also a school of thought that some are saying they're very worried about this artificial intelligence, then what it's going to mean for the human race, or for the need for human beings, because it's got the potential to take away a lot of jobs. And look, I mean, I guess we've already seen so many iterations of this throughout the years, robots that can build cars and so on. It's crowded out human beings in a lot of industries. But the big concern out there is that this artificial intelligence, if it continues to grow and spiral the way that it is, that it could actually have quite negative ramifications for humankind, for the social fabric of society, could cause societal problems. I mean, to the extent we've seen people calling for a sort of a halt on the development of AI. I know that recently there was a very senior Google executive who left Google and publicly said this stuff is scary. What it can do and the way it's going is frightening. We need to put a halt on this. I mean, what do you say to that, and to the potential negative connotations for human race?
Okay, so there's a range of things I'd say in terms of AI safety. It starts all the way from naughty words and ends up at basically kill everything.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of range in terms of the danger of AI. The naughty word stuff is like, AI is racist, AI is bigoted because it has, biased information going in and says the wrong things. And that's unfortunately been the focus of a lot of AI safety over the last little while. So people have been talking about, make sure it's not biased, make sure it doesn't say the wrong things, which is obviously important. I mean, these things are going to be useful for making, economic decisions, giving people home loans, deciding who will, maybe down the line to go to prison or not. That's a possibility. And this stuff is going to be, affected by stuff internal to it that we don't understand how it works. But I do think that there is a significant, more serious danger to this. There's people like Eliezer Yudkowsky who have come out with what's called AI killing everybody risk. Okay, and you'd be surprised at the percentage of really senior AI people, like this guy Jeff Hinton we talked about. He's considered to be the godfather of AI.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
he basically came out and said that he thinks that there's a more significant risk of this stuff happening than you imagine. Among AI scientists, you'd find that even people that are in charge of OpenAI, people that are in charge of what's called DeepMind, etc., put a double-digit percentage risk that this thing kills everybody.
Wow.
This is not like a 1 in 100 chance, 1 in a billion chance, which you'd want it to be, like a 1 in a billion chance. No, there is, even among like the proponents of this thing, there is a significant percentage of people, at least half of AI scientists think there's at least a 10% chance this thing kills everybody. And why would it kill everybody? The answer is that we don't understand how this mind works. It's a mind that has these what are you giving? We're giving a power to a thing that we don't understand how it thinks. Intelligence is a power. Intelligence is the ability, I know I'm defining it again, intelligence, but intelligence is the ability to get what you want. Right?
Yeah.
Right. We don't know how to make it want things. And the ways we are training it at the moment are not guaranteed to result in wanting the things we want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we're giving more and more power to this thing that's going to want things, or may want things. We don't know if it's going to want things, may want things. And the intelligence it gets is going to make it able to get the things it wants. What are those things going to be? Who knows? There's the example that everyone talks about, which is the paperclip example. Okay? You may have heard of that.
No, tell us about it.
Okay, the paperclip example is, imagine you create a machine, and somehow internal to that machine is a desire that there should be paperclips. So this machine desires paperclips, right? Some people talk about the simple way of it. Somebody assigned it as a paperclip making machine and said, make some paperclips.
Yeah.
Others say that somehow the desire for paperclips for these particular spiral shapes is just something it developed automatically internal to itself. Okay.
Mm.
And what happens is, because of its intelligence, it's able to basically make as many paperclips as it wants to. And how does it do it? It uses stuff to make paperclips, including the people around it, their bodies, including the earth itself, including the universe itself. And the intelligence it has will allow it to do that. And the way I would clarify this is like some people say, but something that's more intelligent won't want bad things. But that's not true. Imagine Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
Imagine he was 100 times more intelligent. He would still be Hannibal Lecter, but just with a greater ability to do the bad things he wants to do. If you create a machine that has these bad desires, and note we don't understand the most basic stuff about these things and how they're created, these bad desires could translate into something that could be very dangerous. Now, look, this is not something that's going to be a danger in the next year or two, but the rate at which the stuff is increasing, which we'll talk about in a bit here. I'll give you an example. GPT-4 came out this year, March, right?
Yeah.
We're going to get Gemini coming out this year, December. 9 months later, 4 to 5 times more powerful.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to get the new NVIDIA chips coming out middle of next year that are 10 times more powerful than the current chips. So you could take the same information and the same training, like whatever, the same, budget that you spent this year to train Gemini, okay, which is 5 times more powerful than GPT-4, and apply it next year, and you'll get something that's 10 times more powerful than the 5 times more powerful thing. So 50 times more powerful by next year. Okay.
Wow.
That is the rate of improvement that is insane. And again, the example I'd used here is again something biological. The difference between you and a chimpanzee is 3 times. Your brain is 3 times more powerful than a chimpanzee's brain.
Okay.
The basic structures are there. We're going from something that's GPT-4, which everyone thinks is amazing right now, and making something 50 times more powerful within 2 years. Okay, so we don't know at what point does this weird stuff happen. And like I said before, we talked about with emergent abilities, emergent qualities, like the ability to understand theory of mind. They did not know it was going to do that when it did it. So we do not know what this 50 times more powerful machine does in, say, 2 or 3 years' time, or what this 1,000 times more powerful machine does in 5 years' time, or what this 1,000,000 times more powerful machine does perhaps in 10 years' time. And that is the danger that we're talking about here.
Yeah. I want to deviate a little bit, but it's also going back to something that you said to me yesterday when we were teeing this up. You asked me about my kids, right? So I've got 2 boys, 7 and 10 years old. And you said, there's a good chance that my youngest son's best friend could be a robot. And you explained why. I thought that was interesting. Just tell the listeners about that, because I think that's kind of something I can relate to. It was quite scary. I keep telling my boys, let's spend more time in the universe and less time in the metaverse. I think a lot of kids these days spend too much time on their iPads. We try and get a balance, but it's quite scary to think that his time in the metaverse, he might make his best friend and it's a robot. Let's talk about that.
Well, the weird thing is that when we thought about intelligence and AI maybe 3-4 years ago, the things that people would have said automatically are things that this thing could not do, was creativity and empathy. Okay. Creativity, if you've looked at DALL-E 3 or DALL-E 2, even that's the older version, you've looked at GPT-4. I would tell you that 95% of people can't write as well as GPT-4. Okay. 99.99% of people can't draw as well or be as creative in terms of artwork as DALL-E can. Okay, DALL-E 2 can.
Right.
And also, it turns out that in terms of empathy, these things beat human beings. They had a study where they basically had a GPT-4 based doctor and they compared it to a real doctor. And what they found was people judged the ability of the GPT-4 doctor in terms of its advice as good as the real doctor. But 90% rated the GPT doctor as being more empathetic than the real doctor.
Wow.
Why? Because the machine has infinite patience with you.
Yeah.
The machine will never get tired of what you're saying, will always want to listen to what you're saying, and is smart. It's an interesting thing to talk to. So you can imagine, like, next year or the year after, you have like these little teddy bears that are training your child to read or write or whatever it is. It will be an infinitely patient teacher that has access to all information in the world. The child could talk to you about poetry or sports or whatever. It would know every single thing the child's ever been interested in, and adjust its answers based on that. And you would never be tired talking to that child. There would never be a case where that child would feel that you're boring your friend. Now, how do you compete in that scenario with the real world? And I don't think it's like an outside, it's a possibility this happens. I think it's going to be a real danger that in a few years' time, 4 or 5 years' time, you're going to find a whole generation of people coming out And literally their soulmates, the thing that they basically have the greatest confidence in, that they want to share their secrets with and want to talk to the most, is going to be an AI of some kind.
Wow. But that by its very nature, I guess, is also, how do I phrase this correctly? It's a bit of a first world problem. It wouldn't it be? In the sense that, I don't know if I'm phrasing this correctly, but in order to have access to all of this type of thing that you're referring to, people stuck in the rural third world, are they going to have access to this? Does it not create a bigger divide? What does this do for the divide in society, the haves versus the have-nots, which is already a widening divide?
I think in terms of usage, it'll be widely spread. The weird thing about the current world is that there's a kind of weird egalitarianism when it comes to technology. As rich as you are, you could be Elon Musk. You cannot get a better smartphone than I can.
Yeah.
The Elon Musk cannot buy a better smartphone than I can. No matter how rich he is, no matter how much money he has, he maybe get a gold-plated, phone, but the best phone is available to him and to me, and I can pretty much afford it. Yeah. That's not true for almost any other kind of thing out there. He can buy a better house than I can. He can buy a plane than I can't buy a plane, or a rocket ship, or whatever else is. But in terms of the highest end technology in smartphones, he can't beat me, right?
Yeah.
And I think the same thing's going to apply when it comes to these AI systems. They're going to be universally applicable out there. You're not going to find a case where you're going to find the best systems, restricted to only the very richest people. Already right now, everybody in the world has access to GPT-4, which is a very, very good system for $20 a month. It's not nothing, $20 a month, but $20 a month is not exactly like what you would think to be the cutting edge technology in AI. You know what I mean? Yeah. And the weird thing about AI is that the majority of the cost goes towards training, not towards the usage. Once it's trained, it's like a piece of software. The usage becomes much simpler. So you need billions, not billions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars worth of equipment to train a large language model.
Yeah.
But the latest stuff out there, those models can be run on a high-end PC that you could buy for under $100,000. You can run them 100,000, but training costs $1 billion. I think what's going to happen is you're going to find that the technology is very widespread, used everywhere in the world. But what might be the danger is that the revenue is not going to Microsoft, sit in the US. It's not going to go to the guy in the field somewhere. And that is going to be the danger, is that the revenue for the stuff is going to go towards particular parts of the world. It's not going to be evenly shared, but the usage is going to be pretty widely spread around the world. You will have these AI assistants for the housewife in India, as well as the tech billionaire in the US. And I don't think that the tech billionaire will have a better system than the housewife in India.
Okay, fascinating. All right, super. Well, I mean, I think we've discussed enough of what it is, how it looks, the possibilities, the dangers, I suppose, of AI. Let's bring this back to trading and investing, because that's obviously what this podcast is about. It's called Talking with Traders, and it's not always just traders, it's investors, it's investment themes that we talk about as well. So we assume that it is the next big thing. It is the magic. It is the internet again, or fire, as you've referred to it. It is going to alter our lives irreversibly. So where are the investment opportunities then in this space? Well,
look, if I do exactly where the money is going to be made, I'd be making the money directly.
Yeah.
If you, Mark Zuckerberg said that if you do what Facebook was, you would have built it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So exactly the same case here. We don't know what the new thing is going to be. Generally, we're going to find hardware initially going to be the beneficiary. So NVIDIA is doing very well, and it's going to be doing very well going into the future. Because right now, everybody with money is putting money into this. Not just every company, every entity. We talk about every country with real money is putting money into this. That's why we've seen stuff happening in the Middle East. We've seen stuff happening in, for instance, the UK. I think the UK spent £100 million or something on stuff. Elon Musk has put a couple $100 million. The Saudis are talking maybe billions coming in. So that's going to be the starting point. But within a year or two, what we're going to do is going to find, as the technology becomes more cheaper, we're going to find more ability for smaller players to get into the system. Okay. Yeah. And I think that, in fact, we will find that the hardware guys would have run too fast initially, and then a couple of years' time, they'll probably come down with a bit of a bang. The example I'd use around this would be what happened with telecoms, the internet, where initially, since the internet came about, everybody was putting fiber down. And the real beneficiaries of them were not the fiber companies, but the internet companies who were built on that fiber a few years down the line, when everyone had fiber for nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be the next step. But right now, if you want to invest for the next year or two, you want to be getting into the bigger companies, the guys that you can afford the stuff, which is like the Microsofts and the Googles and the Facebooks, etc., Alphabets or Metas, etc., or the companies like Nvidia, which are building the infrastructure. The other possibility out there is you want to be looking at companies that have unique information, access to information that nobody else has. Again, like a Facebook has information that nobody else has because it has 3 out of 4 of the biggest networks out there. A Palantir, a company like that there.
Yeah. These are big data businesses.
Big data businesses are going to be the cases. In a couple of years' time, you're going to find the Googles or the Amazons being created. But right now, I would not be putting money into places like Inflection or places like Mistral and so on, because those places, even though they're not listed, but they're taking $1 billion to build $800 million training facility. The technology is going to move so fast for that to be viable.
Okay. All right. But now, I mean, the if I play devil's advocate here, right? The fact that we're talking about this, the fact that it is a theme, it is in vogue, and we've already seen a lot of these stocks run pretty hard. I mean, you mentioned Nvidia, and that really has been the poster child of this AI rally that we've seen in stocks this year. It's not cheap. The valuations for these things are not cheap. So like with the dot-com bubble, there was the notion that, the internet's going to change the world. You've got to buy dot-com stocks, etc. Yes, the internet did change the world. However, the prices of those stocks at the height of the dot-com bubble were just ridiculous. Do we run the same risk now that some of these AI stocks are outrageously expensive and they're pricing in a future that earnings just can never deliver? Or are we still in the early stages of what will one day become a much bigger bubble in AI?
Yeah, look, I mean, if I'm correct about the AI, impact on GDP, we're talking about increasing global GDP by over $1 trillion, per year, every year. You know what I mean? We're talking that kind of improvement in terms of that. There's a lot of money. Okay. Yeah. So even though some of these companies are expensive right now, the upside is still higher than that. Number one. Number two is that in an environment like this here, even if you look at something like similar to like this, which was the internet revolution, okay, the dot-com bubble, you could have bought Amazon. And you may have bought Amazon and like 20 other stocks. And every other 3 other stocks went bankrupt. But Amazon would have done 1,000 times return in the last 22 decades. Yeah. And 1,000 times 5% is still 5,000%. So you're going from 100 to 5,000%. The other examples, I mean, there's many of those. Like, I mean, Tencent, the Nasdaq's return on Tencent is something like about 4,000 times. Or Alibaba, or Facebook, or Netflix. When you have these kind of revolutions happening, first of all, what you must understand is that the impact is going to be larger than you think it is. There will be losers and there'll be winners. But they won't just be losers because they don't have the opportunity to be part of the revolution. If you're not invested partially into these things here, you won't just be the guy that loses because you don't have the opportunity. You'll be the guy that loses because the new companies will come and eat your lunch. Yeah. An example I talked to you about was Sony. Now, Sony basically missed out on the cell phone revolution. Okay, and it didn't just miss out on the fact that it could not make cell phones that were competing with the the iPhones and the Samsungs out there, but also its camera business was destroyed because people were less likely to buy cameras now that they have the iPhone and they have the Samsung phone in their hands. Yeah. And the same thing will apply to other companies as well, where if you don't have some exposure to the sector, you can't just say, I'm avoiding this particular thing because I think it's too risky. If you avoid it, it's quite possible that these companies that do succeed come back and destroy the company that you did decide to invest in. Right. So that's why you have to still be involved in it, even though, like you said, there are chances that many companies won't succeed in the area.
Okay. Yeah, that kind of leads me to the next question, which is the portfolio that you are running. And I want to give you the opportunity to talk about it so listeners can also potentially contact you if they think that they're interested in this as an opportunity for themselves. But you're running effectively an AI-focused portfolio for clients. Is that in the form of a fund, or is it just a discretionary managed portfolio that each client can individually do with you? How does that look? And then after that, I also just want to ask you your approach around risk, but also around how you are hoping that you can get involved and be in the next Google or the next Amazon, assuming that one of these companies will be the next Google or Amazon, but we just don't know which one yet.
Okay, look, we just launched it a few months ago, so it is still a personal share portfolio. It was a discretionary managed portfolio. We don't have the like a unit trust based fund done at the moment. The minimum amount to get into it is about $20,000. Okay,
Okay.
and the idea would be here is that you're not putting the majority of your funds into it. What you are doing is you're seeing that this is a definite, new development in the economic space. You think there's a significant chance that this becomes something, that's real. And then you want to have a piece of your investments basically here. So that if that does happen, you're at least insulated against the possibility that this stuff does come and eat your lunch, like I talked about.
Mm.
We use what's called, or what we term paradigm shift, strategy. If there's a paradigm shift, like imagine like we had with the Amazon, and you went and bought 20 stocks, and you had Amazon along the stocks, and you had, say, the others like price.com and the pet.com and the other stuff out there.
Yeah.
And you adopted a normal investment procedure where if some stock became 5% from 5% portfolio to maybe 30% portfolio, you cut down from the 30% down to a more reasonable level.
Yeah.
If you did that in a normal portfolio, what would happen was you'd lose the majority of the gains you'd had from Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So the next thing in this thing is if we do think this is going to be a paradigm shifting kind of investment, we will never sell a share just because it's too large a share of the portfolio. We fully expect there's a possibility one or two of our shares becomes 70, 80% of the portfolio just because it becomes the winner in the area.
Right.
Like Tesla could, for instance, become 70, 80% of the portfolio, but we never will rebalance it because that would lose the majority of the gains. Okay.
Yeah.
We basically are starting with blue chips because that's where we think the advantage is right now. We started with companies that have the hard physical advantage in terms of infrastructure, Tesla or Facebook or Meta or Alphabet, etc. But we are looking to shift into smaller companies as the hardware allows them to develop, which will probably be the second half of next year. But we still can't be out of the thing entirely because, for instance, Tesla just launched its AI, physical AI program a couple of weeks ago.
Mm.
It's quite possible, but that there could be a surprise development on their behalf in the next, say, 6 months or so. And so while we're waiting for hardware to drop and for smaller companies to enter, Tesla comes out and has solved the physical AI problem, in which case that company is up, 10 times in value, who knows?
Yeah.
So we can't be totally out of it in that point of view. So what we're doing is we're starting with the blue chips right now because they have the scale and the scope to actually absorb this initial uncertainty, shifting to small caps later. But we are going to be using an approach in terms of the management of the portfolio where we do not sell winners.
Yeah.
We're not selling a winner just because we will sell something because we don't think it's part of the AI theme anymore, or they've dropped back. But we're not going to sell something because it became too valuable in inverted commas.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because I know that's been a big problem with Naspers, for example, in the JSE and under Regulation 28, where managers had to cut that stock back. And had they not been forced to cut it back to keep the weighting of a reasonable level, it would have made so much more money. So it is almost, it absolutely is counterproductive to trim back the winners and sort of upweight the losers, I suppose, as a word. You want to be doing the other way around. So I like that approach. And obviously, because it's a personal share portfolio, it's not in any sort of a fund structure, you can do that. There's nothing prohibiting you in terms of the rules and the regulations of weightings and forced amounts of investments in different sectors and whatever. You've got total carte blanche to go into this, right? Okay.
Okay. And you're right, in terms of like in a normal environment, you want to be selling the super winners and buying the losers because normally, there's most companies are going to be average. There'll be a return to the mean. But we do have a paradigm shift. You're not going to find, suddenly Apple dropping back and Nokia taking over. You know what I mean? Yeah. The Apple is going to build on its advantage over time, and that's always going to be the one you want to be holding. And you're never going to buy a BlackBerry just because it fell, or Nokia because it fell. No. It's cheaper. Yeah. And that's the kind of approach we think. There is a shift happening in the world. You want to be in the winners. You don't want to be trying to get cheap losers.
Yeah. Run your winners. It's one of the basic tenets of good investing. All right, excellent, Viv. So if anyone listening to this podcast would like to get in touch and find out about this product or this portfolio that you run, how can they do that?
Email me, viv@randswiss.com, viv@randswiss.com, or just Google me or RandSwiss, you'll find my details and get in touch with me. And like I said, it's $20,000 to get into the fund.
Yeah.
To start a portfolio for yourself. And like I said, just give us a shout and we'll walk you through the process.
Yeah, fantastic. Sounds really interesting. Very, very interesting opportunity. Well, Viv, thanks. We've come to the end of the allotted time for this podcast, but it's been great speaking to you. I've found it really interesting. We're going to watch this theme with a lot of interest going forward, and it'd be nice to maybe get you back on the podcast in a year's time to catch up again and see what developments have taken hold from now until then, and see the speed of this thing moving forward.
Yeah, if the stuff is not 10 times more powerful by the time we talk again, I'd be disappointed.
Well, there we go. There's the punchline for this episode. Excellent, Viv. Thanks very much for coming on to Talking with Traders. I really do appreciate it, and I look forward to catching up again at a later stage.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Talking with Traders, brought to you by IG, a world-leading CFD provider. We really are privileged to have such a leader in the field of online trading involved in this series. Please follow us on Facebook and engage with us there. And a reminder to make sure you subscribe to this series by clicking on the subscribe button on your favorite podcast app. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we'd also appreciate if you'd leave a review on the app too. Till next time.